I read a stat the other day. I talked about it on social media this morning. If you eliminate smoking, you save more lives than the entire medical system does.
That's crazy. Well, I imagine it's between smoking and alcohol abuse.
Well, and that's not even alcohol abuse, but yeah.
Between those two alone.
His whole point was we try to add when it comes to health, but the biggest benefits are down to subtraction.
Oh, yeah.
So if you subtract
processed carbohydrates.
Exactly. You have processed foods, alcohol consumption, tobacco, whatever it is, you start subtracting. That's way more beneficial than adding things in a lot of cases.
Well, the thing that's interesting is like when you're in Europe and you go and eat at like the cafe, like it's food that was made. Like,
yes,
it wasn't like come in a plastic bag and you feel so much better.
No, even all the breads, they're all baked in the bakery. Yeah. Like wherever you are is where the bread came from, not a far off factory.
Yeah. Well, and most of them aren't using active yeast. They're using like like so many of them are sourdough. So they use a healthier, because the sourdough, I guess it like breaks down the gluten so that that protein's not so hard to.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
My wife's into making sourdough, so.
Oh yeah, it's a big craze nowadays.
I'm not an expert, so don't count me. Don't hold any of this towards me.
It was interesting when we were there in April. We were in this little town in France called Colmar.
Okay.
It was beautiful, beautiful, and I was running through all the streets at like 6 a.m. The whole place smelled like bread. Because all the little bakeries were baking their bread for the morning. I'm just like, this is amazing. You come to the United States and the big truck backs up to the Starbucks. They pull out their pastries from the truck. They pull them all out of the plastic packaging. They line them all up and then there you go.
Yeah, well, like everything about Europe is different though. Because like when we were in Germany, like I realized like the old wall that was around the city is still there.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't say like, oh, we're just going to build all these houses and sprawl. They basically built all the houses within inside the wall, even though they haven't needed that wall for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
But because of that, like everybody can walk to the marketplace and to the bakery and all of that, and it's close. And so like, it's not inconvenient. Like you walk to work and on the way back, you stop and grab a loaf of bread and produce.
Also in this book, he talked a lot about urban planning, and we've been so consumed by trying to make cities efficient that we've kind of screwed everything up in a lot of ways. He's like, a lot of these cities, like it's maddening to drive around in a place like that because it makes no sense, but it makes it way more livable, way more enjoyable. The people are far happier.
Yeah, I think I'm thinking about the city and like, your car's not efficient there.
No.
You're probably parking your car like in a parking lot outside of the like.
If you even have a car.
Yeah, because you're just getting on the train.
Mm-hmm.
Which, by the way, so we were in Versailles, and my wife and I, we stopped and got like a quiche, like cheese quiche, and fresh bread, and like something out of the movies. You break it open, like the steam comes out. You're like, It was the best like meal I've ever had on a train. Just fresh bread. Cheese quiche, loved it.
I wish we would have eaten a little bit. I controversial opinion, I did not like the food in Germany all that much.
Probably not controversial. I mean, it's potatoes, onions,
and
meat,
just meat,
and I could see that. Like, so when I was there during an asparagus festival, they have white asparagus in this part of Germany.
Oh yes, I saw it. Yeah, they sell it all over the place.
Sell it all over.
Yeah,
2 weeks of asparagus, and you're like, I could not.
But the asparagus they're huge. They're like sausages almost. They're
and it's
as big as asparagus I've seen.
Well, and it's like, hey, I'll have a few pieces of asparagus with my meal, but like it's like a whole plate of asparagus that comes with your meal. You're like, listen, I smelled my piss for the last 6 weeks or whatever it was. Like it was 2 weeks. I was there for 2 weeks, and it was just like, I'm done.
Yeah.
So,
well, we're going back in probably August.
Yeah, it's a good time to be there.
Yeah.
So we were there. I've been there in the winter. I've been there in the spring and in the fall. Fall's pretty cool.
I'm pretty excited. We're timing it around then because Zeppelin has something called Stein Expo, and they set it up in a quarry. So it is all of their machines but in a quarry working, and you can operate them or whatever it is. So it's like their own trade show that they set up, but everything is operational. Not everything's pretty. It's out in the field. It's supposed to be a really good time. So we're going to try to go to that.
I think it was on Dirt Talk. I didn't realize like Zeppelin actually made Zeppelin.
I didn't either. Yeah. And then we get the whole history lesson.
That's pretty cool.
Totally fascinating. Like you walk into their headquarters and they have one of the big wooden propellers on one of the original Zeppelins. And that was, if you think about it, it was a war product. So then World War II wrapped up and they're like, hey, you can't make what you make anymore. But instead of rolling over, they're just like, well, we have all of these skills, these technical skills, machining skills. Why don't we go do something else with it? 126, they become one of the world's largest cat dealers.
Yeah. Germany's pretty like incredible when you think about like geographically, it's really not that big of a country. And the number of manufacturing companies that reside in Germany is really impressive.
Yeah.
Like when I was there with Bauer, who manufactures drills, we went and visited job sites with them. And I think we went to the Porsche factory. We drove by Audi. We drove by BMW. They're all within like, half a day's drive of each other.
Mm-hmm.
And you start thinking like, all of this comes from this little spot in the world. It's pretty incredible.
And it's a developed nation.
Yeah.
And so the whole concept of we can't make things anymore because it's too expensive. It's like, well, Germany does it.
Yeah.
Why can't we?
Germans, like, I got to give them credit. They think through stuff differently.
Yes.
Like we'd go to their drilling jobs, and here in the U.S., there'd be like 5 to 8 guys doing that job. There'd be 3 there.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be like, that's it.
Yeah.
And it's because they use, different attachments differently, or like even rebar cages on drilled shafts. Their rebar cages are all welded. They have crush rings that you can rig them with just one chain because of it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, on the smaller shafts, on the larger ones, you can't. But
yeah.
Anyways, it's incredible the amount of work that they can get done with, as few people as they do. I think that's how they can afford to manufacture. They've thought through the process so well.
Well, and that's where, like we were talking about this last night, just the inefficiency in American construction in a lot of ways. I think a lot of people just accept whatever is happening, that's just the production that we can achieve. But you go to somewhere like Europe and they use, like the quickest example, they just use the right machine for the right job. And I know that's not very common in the United States. Like there's very rarely a time where you have a specialized machine for a task. It's just use a 336 to knock down that building, to dig that trench, to go dig in some rock over there, to just do whatever we needed to do because that makes more sense financially. But then you see these companies over there, they're spending a lot more money on equipment, but they do things way more effectively with much higher quality, with less labor. And so you're like, well, it makes sense. Like that's a different model of doing things, but over here, it's just not adopted.
Yeah. I mean, I think it'd be interesting to see because I don't know what the profitability in construction in Europe is, or what their cost for construction is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, does it translate well? I don't know, but I will agree with you that we have a tendency to be less thoughtful than we should be.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that, even I was talking to somebody the other day, is some of it's on construction, some of it's on the design and engineering,
Mm-hmm. And just the contracts.
Well, yeah, but like 20 years ago, we'd get a set of plans, and those set of plans would only change 4 or 5 times the whole project, maybe 3 or 4 times. But because of the digital age and changes being so much easier, we start projects sooner, which in our mind reduces the length of time it will take to build. But then because of the constant change, there's loss in efficiency when it actually comes to building it. Like, hey, by the way, I'm glad you installed that fire line, but turns out we actually need to put a storm drain underneath it. And that's not easy.
Yeah. And now you're navigating around a utility that you put in, not someone else put in.
Right. Yeah. And you're trying to slide a box culvert underneath it. And, and so it's interesting. It also is interesting, like, Jason Schroeder, we've dealt with Jason Schroeder. He talks a lot about flow, and flow's a really important part of how we gain efficiency. We don't really think through flow a whole lot. Like an example, today I'm going to install 400 feet of water line. like the number of job sites that have like the material thought out of like, today I am going to be installing 400 feet of pipe. So my pipe should be staged in the right location. My gravel should be staged in the right location. Do I have all the shoring I am going to need? Because am I going to get deeper at some point and need my boxes? Where are they at? Like, you see a lot of job sites. So if I speak out of turn, you let me know. But I don't see that happen a lot.
Very rarely.
And so, some of that's at the project level. Daily huddles or whatever you want to call them. It's like, today we're going to move dirt. The hazards associated with that is you need to make sure you make eye contact and you need to be wearing your high vis. But the number of leaders, like foremen and superintendents, who talk through, hey, today we're going to be working in this area. We have cuts that are about this deep. We're going to be going over there. Hey, the proctor that we should be using, we believe is this proctor because this is the type of dirt we have. If we start having compaction issues, let's make sure that the tester is using the right proctor. Or if we think the dirt changes, let's have a conversation. Like that level of planning and detail is not happening on a daily basis.
Oftentimes the proctor, for example, is not even shared with the guy in the compactor, for example. The foreman knows it, but it's not even discussed. And then now you have an enemy out of the poor soils tester who's just like, he's just doing his job most of the time. Sometimes they're assholes, but that's everything we do.
Yeah.
But even a step further, I've seen the really good meetings will talk about Chris on the compactor. Hey, if you see something, let these guys know. You guys are going to be in the, and then what are you looking out for when you're in this cut? Like they'll bring the human element into things as well. So they'll talk about the operation, talk about what the heck needs to go on. Like the safety stuff, that's okay, great. That's a given. But then they talk about what needs to happen and then who's doing the work. And then they get the crew involved in talking about it. That's a proper pre-shift meeting.
Yeah, and it doesn't happen so often, but like it changes the game. I was on a job site and things weren't going well. And so I went and met with them and I talked to our supervisors who were out there and I said, hey, what we need to do is we need to help them understand what is it that we want accomplished. And I think that probably happens fairly well. Still not a lot of clarity, but that probably happens pretty well. But then I said, what we're going to do, and you probably can attest this because you've seen the FTXs. We basically said, hey, we're going to take what we learned from Echelon Front and we're going to apply it here. So we said, this is what we want to accomplish. You have 15 minutes to come up with a plan, and the plan needs to be detailed. It needs to talk through exactly what is everybody on this crew going to do? What is their contingency plan if things don't go as they expect? And then what are all the safety and quality measures associated with all of those tasks? And then we're going to come back and we're going to call on different people from this group to go ahead and teach us what is the plan for today. And the level of engagement that the crew had was completely different. Like right now, crews don't get engaged because, and these are blanket statements, but they don't engage because somebody stands there and says, this is what we're going to do today. And then it's like, any questions? Nobody wants to ask a question because they don't want to be belittled in front of everybody.
Yeah, you don't want to be an idiot. Yeah.
They just be quiet. And then no wonder that same supervisor's like, nobody knows what they're doing. Like, what's going on out here?
Well, and yeah, it's, and that's a majority of meetings I see. Most of them are in that format. It's kind of, and the chain of command is all, it's kind of, most construction companies operate under like a traditional command and control structure. That's why I think there's resentment for the office, because it's usually the office telling the field, this is how you're going to build the job. They're not really making the decisions about how to build the job. So it comes down, the foreman is by no means probably making those decisions. It comes down from the super or the PM or whoever it is. And then they have to relay that to there's no discussion. There's no involvement with the people doing the work and how we're going to go accomplish it. Rarely is what I see.
Yeah. And that's probably because it's seen as cost. Hey, how am I going to pull these people out of, production to go do this?
Yeah.
But then the efficiency, like, hey, if you spent 4 hours and you took everybody that was going to be doing the work and you really ran through a detailed plan over 4 hours, 4 hours on a project that's a few months long is nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Like the efficiency gains could be so small and they would way outweigh that cost. But being busy in construction is often equated with efficiency.
Yes.
Like, we worked 60 hours this week. We were efficient. No, you would have been efficient if you worked 40 hours this week and got the same amount of work done.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not what happens.
This is what I'm afraid of, though, is this like death spiral of companies. They're struggling for workforce, and their backlogs are just growing right now, which is usually a great thing. Like if you have a good, healthy backlog, that's great.
Yeah.
But it's getting to the point now where it's like a ways out. I mean, the backlogs are really starting to stack up, and these companies, since they're having workforce problems, they can't chew through that backlog as efficiently as they can, or equipment or materials or whatever it is getting, there's just more and more pressure being applied. So now they can't afford to take that. They definitely can't afford to involve people now and slow production down. They definitely can't afford to train. They definitely can't afford to do the things that they need to do to get out of the problem that everybody's facing. and there's only more pressure.
Yeah.
And the market's good right now. So what happens when the market's not good? Then there's even more pressure. And it just, it's like, where does it start to go in a better direction?
It's kind of like you put your boat in the water and you forget to put the plug in. Like you can just decide I'm going to try and bail out all the water with a bucket.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what we try and do often. We the easy button in our mind is, well, the water's in, grab the bucket and start doing something, which it's good that we're willing to just work, right, and go do it. But the right solution is find the plug in, put the plug in first, and then let's go bail out the water. And so, just on like specifically on like a project before we get globally on the industry, it's so easy to bring in a superintendent and say, this is how we estimated the job. We're getting ready to turn the project over to the project team. And we just want to run through every item, every task, and make sure this is how you want to build it. If you don't, let's talk through it. Let's build out how you want to build it. Let's see what the costs are. Do they align? Do they not? If they do, then that's how we'll do it. Like, it doesn't have to be our plan. Yes, there's a cost restriction, and there's usually great reason by an estimator for why they bid it the way they did. But that collaboration is almost always going to find a better solution. And we found when we were doing this on a regular basis that project teams felt like it was more of their plan, and then there was less excuses when things didn't go right.
Yeah, well, because the estimator's the scapegoat if it gets all screwed up. Like they screwed it all up.
They've never built work. They don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
They didn't have the right equipment or the right production rate, or they didn't take into consideration this or that, whatever it might be.
You'd think it's common sense, though, but I've worked in estimating departments, and there was very little collaboration with the field as far as how we're going to go build this job, which is what I always found strange. And I didn't know very much. I'm like, I guess this is just how it's done.
Yeah.
Like you just get in a room, the estimators get together, and they build a bid out based on the historical data.
Yeah.
But there's just this huge disconnect.
Yeah. Well, in fairness, because I estimated for a lot of years, the opposite's also true, which is like field people would sometimes come into the office and be like, no way you can do it that fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
No way. Like, okay, well, we know what the market will dictate for price. So then help me figure out, like, here's the constraint. The market will dictate that we can't charge more than $4 a cubic yard to move dirt in this market. So what you're telling me is $6 a cubic yard. So we're just that bad at moving dirt that we can't be competitive? Well, that's not what I'm saying. Okay, well then let's talk through this realistically, because I think it's because, culturally maybe they feel like they inherit a plan that they can't perform on, and then when things don't go right, they get held accountable, but they didn't get it. It's like almost the same type of death spiral where it's like,
yeah.
So they always want it. They always want more time instead of them saying like, how could I do this quicker and more efficiently, they always want more budget.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And the accountability on that kind of stuff, I feel like whoever's doing the work, regardless of where the problem is, will feel the pressure more than an estimator. Like, unless the estimator really blows a bid. Like, there was one job that it was like, I don't know, they bid 50 million and they won the project, and the second bid was like 120 million. So they were just like, way.
Did they actually do it?
Yeah, they had to.
Well, usually there's like a bid bond and they would walk.
For whatever, it was like Army Corps or something like that. So they were doing it.
That sucks.
But it's like, you're probably not going to have a job if you screw up that bad, unless you've been there for a long time. But unless it's like glaringly terrible, estimators, there's not. I feel like they can get by.
Yeah, I mean, I agree.
Not that they're bad people, because what they're doing is insane. At the same, we're the only industry that goes and says what we can build something for before we go and build it.
Yeah, there's probably other industries that do it, but the way in which we do it is very unique in that we say, hey, here's a project. You have 2 weeks to ask questions, another week to put a price together. And I know it's going to take you 2 years to build this project, but we're going to take the low bidder.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be as competitive as you can be, and try and foresee economic uncertainty throughout that.
Well, so going back to the Europe thing, that I think is one of the big differentiators in European construction is there's a much better relationship between the contractor and the owner. And that's what I've been told, is that's why margins are better and equipment's fancier, and they have more flexibility to do things that we can't do in the United States because they're not all focused on kicking the shit out of each other. It's a lot more collaborative, but because of our system and the way we bid work, you're all like, the house always wins in a lot of ways, but they don't. They think they're getting the best value for the project, but rarely.
Well, there's always change orders in that, and it's always.
Yes. And then you're like, who in their right mind would award a project that's very important to someone that potentially has a terrible reputation just because they gave you a better number? Like, it just doesn't, a lot of it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, no, I agree. One of the things that's interesting is, years ago, I read about this municipality or agency that was trialing second bid wins.
Yes, that's common in Europe.
I think it was a European country.
Yeah.
And you think, like, that is fascinating. That probably alone changes everything, because it's not so much about, can I be the cheapest, or it's more like, I'm going to put a good number to this.
Yes.
Because if I try to focus too much on being cheap, I'm not going to get it.
Mm-hmm.
It also changes, like, when you're out there doing the work, it's not like, oh man, I left 7% on the table. It's like, hey, somebody could do this for 4% cheaper than me. So
yeah.
I think even that alone, like, you're not going to go back to the owner as much to fight, because hey, I was 5% higher than the low guy, so I better just treat the customer right.
Yeah. But there has to be major reform to get something like that together, because there's a big system that works very well with the low bid, with the low bid world.
Well, and I think the knee-jerk reaction would be, what you're telling me is, hey, I'll go pull the data and we'll say number 2 was on average 3.5% higher. So what you're telling me is I'm going to spend 3.5% more next year. Like, that means I can't build as many projects.
Mm-hmm.
But it'd be interesting to say, well, but how much are you paying in change orders in that same time period?
In litigation?
And litigation and all that. Like, maybe it doesn't.
Yeah.
It'd probably have to be a smaller municipality or agency to go, to have the flexibility to say, let's go try this, and them to share their successes and maybe catch on.
But even on the contractor side too, there are sizable contractors out there that their business model only works because of change orders.
Yeah.
Like they only work in the public world. I mean, there's some jobs that I'll drive by. It'll be years later. It doesn't look like anything's been done. And I just wonder, like there's one in particular that I'm wondering about. It's just like,
yeah, there's one I've been by.
How do they still, how are they in business at this point? I don't even know. Like they haven't done anything. They're out there working. Like there's stuff going on. It looks a little different every time I go through there. And it's not just one job. It's like every one of their jobs that I go by, it looks like that. I'm just like, there's something going on here. There's something going on here that doesn't add up.
Yeah, or they're, who knows, maybe they're not very profitable.
Or yes, and they're, I don't know. Yeah, I don't get it. Yeah. I was thinking about this morning. I think the workforce thing is a common thing to talk about right now. Yeah. Obviously, that's all I talk about.
Yeah.
And I'm for sure included in this. I think everybody is, it's like a simple but hard problem. Like it's a very simple problem. The solutions are somewhat simple. This is not complicated stuff, but it's also really hard. Like it also is complicated at the same time. There's a lot of people just making broad generalizations. That's like, this is the problem. Everybody's going to college or kids don't want to work. That's our problem. And then they just put their hands up in the air.
Yeah.
Or like, it's a lot of things. I think it's like the way projects are estimated. Projects are bid. Like there's other things out there beyond the labor problem that I think is contributing to the labor problem.
Agreed. It's interesting because the industry is not alone in this. Like life is simple but hard.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and it's because so many of the things that are solutions are hard to be disciplined on.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, whether say it's estimating, we're not going to bid a project with less than 5% profit margin. We're not. Your backlog is getting small.
Mm-hmm.
And you think, well, man, this job's close to home. Really need it. And you put 3% on it. And now all of a sudden there's 2% less profitability in the project. And you miss something. And now you have a project that you're projecting to be a loss.
Mm-hmm.
That lack of discipline just trickled into every part of your business now. So now it's harder to treat your people right. And
totally.
Now the schedule is more of a stress and all of that, right? So I think so often, I think Jocko says like discipline equals freedom, or something like that. I think that's the case. The people problem. Hey, when you hire somebody, treat them right, help them develop their career, pay them right. Like all those things are simple,
mm-hmm.
but being disciplined's hard.
Yeah.
So-and-so came to me, wanted a raise. I can't afford to lose them, so I give them a raise. But the 3 or 4 other people that have been working just as long as that individual, maybe
mm-hmm.
are better, didn't get the raise because they didn't ask for it. And now all of a sudden you have wage issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
It'd be all because you weren't disciplined in the way that you gave out raises.
Well, and very rarely will that person actually leave because they didn't get a raise if you're treating them right.
Exactly.
And if they understand that it's fair and this is how the system works, if there's transparency in how raises even happen, for example.
Yeah.
But if they think the system's unfair, then they're out. But if you're doing all the right things and you say no, you're probably not going to lose that person.
Yeah. Yeah. Or transparency in wage rates. Like,
yes,
it's really interesting. Finding out what somebody else makes often leads to issues,
mm-hmm.
but it shouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we all know who's good. Now, there's some ego involved, but generally speaking, like you can go on a job site and you could be like, hey, who's the best operator out here? Pretty quickly, you're going to get some consensus and people would know. Would that be that shocking that person was getting paid the best? Like, to me, it says, part of me is like, no, it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
But, it takes discipline to say, hey, here's our wage scale for operator level 1s and 2s and 3s. And these are the skills that they need to have to be in each category. And this is how we're going to measure it. And like, that takes discipline to do that.
Well,
and it's not necessarily what people who have grown up in the industry want to do or are good at.
So this brings up an interesting thing I've seen happening is people are so desperate to hire people that they're increasing the wages for incoming people. So you'll hire like a green loader hand. You'll have your production loader hand in the pit that's been there for 15 years, making $30 an hour, say. You bring in a green loader hand and you match that pay. So he's making $28 or $30 an hour. And then you've immediate resentment, an immediate problem that creates.
Yeah. And I would say that's not uncommon.
It's happened more and more. I hear it all the time now.
Yeah. And it's not even intentional. It's just, hey, we need people. That's the solution.
That's the market rate.
The solution is this is what we go do. And we only do our raises for other people once a year. Right. And so when we were in our one of the peer work groups that we did, I think it was the one at CW Matthews, one of the other contractors was talking about how this last year they had to do a wage study twice during the year instead of just normal wage study and raises. This company had to do it 2 other times because they realized the wages were changing and they were having to, bring in new people. That also, to estimators and estimating a project the last 2 years, that's hard, man.
Yeah.
Who would have said, oh, we're going to have 3 wage increases in the next 2 years when they were bidding a project in 2020 and it looked like the world was going to end. Like,
they have labor, materials, and diesel.
Yeah.
They're screwed in all 3 areas. And equipment.
Which probably goes back to just the whole idea of construction, which is why are we a low margin industry? Like there's no good reason that anyone could give me that says we should be a low margin industry. Like you could say, well, you can grow revenue quickly. Like, yeah, I would say, yeah, that's true.
Yes.
But with revenue also means risk. So I have the risk of human life, which is the most important and significant risk that exists in construction. And as a previous business owner, one that would keep you up at night. Night shifts happening tonight. Is there traffic by them? Just did they sleep like they should have during the day? Right. It's scary stuff. Then you have like all the financial risk of just getting all of that right. I have a 2-year project. What are my input costs going to be for labor, equipment, subcontractors, materials? When I bid the job, getting that right, but then forecasting what are they going to be during the 2 years? Incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
Incredibly difficult. And to be doing that at, CFMA, they produce statistics for the industry, Construction Financial Management Association, based off company size, right? So, hey, companies 20 million and below, 50 million and 20 to 50, 100 to 200, and I think 200 plus, something like that. That 100 to 200 average profitability is like 3.1%.
Yeah.
So 3.1%. And there's something called retainage in construction.
And that's 5 to 10%.
5 to 10%.
Yeah.
So it's like, no wonder there's an issue in construction when it comes to having workforce development. Well, we're operating at a low margin. Then our cash is being tied up. Like the number of contractors in America who operate in a line of credit is extremely high. So now they're only making they were making 4%, but they have this money tied up in retainage and receivables. So now they're borrowing and they're paying interest on the money that they're borrowing, and then that chops their margins down even more. Yeah. So, it's interesting.
And then you have Google over here making 40%.
Yeah. Or so many other businesses that are making a fair amount of money.
But I think we're stuck there until we decide not to be.
Well, that's why I said it takes discipline. Like,
yeah.
Like you'd have to listen to this. You're a business owner. You're listening to Dirt Talk, and you'd have to say, you know what? I know I need to do more for my workforce, and I know I need to plan more. I know I need to be more profitable. So I'm not going to, instead of bidding jobs at, 4% profit, I'm going to bid them at 5%. And that's hard to do because you lose a job or two, and it's scary.
But from a credibility standpoint, this is exactly what you did.
Yeah.
Like you eliminated part of your business.
Yeah.
To essentially become more profitable.
So we did what Jim Collins talks about, which is hedgehog concept. Yeah. We said, so the idea behind the hedgehog concept is what can you be best in the world at? What drives your economic engine and what are you passionate about? I think he says, what can you be world class at? And so we went through and said, project size. How are we profitable on project size? How are we profitable on project type? Did schedule and complexity have a component?
So you looked at the historic projects
and said, wow, we have historically been very profitable on projects under $100,000. Mm-hmm. Usually you would say like, well, then let's not do them. But what we realized is we worked for a lot of large companies. And so we said, you have to pre-qualify to even work for them. And most of the people who pre-qualify don't want to do a $100,000 job. Mm-hmm. But we were making like 40% margin on those jobs. 20 to 40. We're like, okay, we should probably still do those. Because if you think about it, if you're doing $1 million job and you're making 5%, we were doing a $100,000 job and making about the same amount of money with a lot less risk. Mm-hmm. Then we said, well, what types of work? Do we do better on industrial big box? Do we do better on this or that? And then we honed in on the actual types of work. And then we found that complex projects, we did a lot better on. So some companies could just move stuff really, really quick.
Yeah.
And we just weren't as good at that. We were better at how do we go take a project that has a tunnel that goes underneath the hospital? And how do we plan that out? And how do we come up with a solution? Then how do we go deliver that? Like that fit us better. And because of that, we end up being, I think I pulled this data before I had resigned. I pulled the data and I was just analyzing it. And it was something like 14.7% over a 5-year period was our average profitability.
Which is way beyond 3%.
Way beyond 3%.
The interesting thing is though that
and that's true profitability, not like just gross. That was net.
It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
The most, like even you go to when I think about this, you go to like the ENR 400 list or whatever it is, it's all revenue.
Yeah.
Like your profitability doesn't matter in the slightest. It's, we were 400, 368th this year. And you're like, okay, you put a lot of money through your business.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, but that's obvious. Like, that's not just like the GC world, the ENR 600, which is for subcontractors, same thing.
Yeah.
But even when and I'm guilty of this, hey, like, so give me an idea how much revenue runs through your business. Because it's like this, that's how big they are.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But not necessarily what we should be going after.
No.
Not at all. Like, if you did ROI or like you did a traditional, like, return on investment calculation, and you looked at how much money do I have tied up in this business and the risk-free rate, and you did a calculation, what a lot of company owners who are, second or third generation, what they would find is if they're producing low margins, they would be better off putting their money in the stock market, right? Like, because you think about the risk associated with construction and the return they're getting, assuming they're operating at a low margin.
Yeah.
They'd be better off moving their money somewhere else. Like, hey, I can go put my money in a money market account and get 3.5% return right now. Well, why would I have it all tied up in this business then?
Yeah.
Like, if I'm taking more risk, I should be pushing more to the bottom line.
And instead, they just go buy more equipment.
Yeah. I mean, and it's a lot more complex than what we're talking. I mean, obviously, we're dumbing it down a little bit, but yes. Yeah.
But it gets into the year. I'm like, I need to buy more equipment.
Well, when Section 179 is the way it is, you say, well, I have bonus depreciation, and how do I get rid of my tax liability? Because I can pay taxes, or I can get this excavator, which is a tool, and I can produce additional revenue with it. Mm-hmm. Very little thought to, do I actually need another excavator? But it works.
Well, it'll be interesting though, because there's no excavators to buy.
I mean, it's freed up a little bit. It's not as bad as it was. Like 5 months ago, it was terrible,
Yeah.
but it's freed up a little bit.
Mm.
And speaking about market, right? So we're trying to get better at BuildWitt of looking at and reading and understanding economic forecasts and what are all the big associations saying, what's going on here. It's interesting because there's rarely really good consensus when it comes to economic forecasts. Generally, there's some consensus, but that consensus can be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, it seems like next year should be pretty flat compared to 2022.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what most people are saying. Like parts of the industry, like residential, like I've heard some residential contractors have laid off because they don't need lots because they're not selling houses as quick. Probably depends on the market you're in.
Very dependent on market, yeah.
But it's happening. And so the statistics show they believe there'll be a shrink in residential construction, but then the money from the Infrastructure Act and
CHIPS and
all of them
yeah.
is starting to come into play, right? Like
Yeah.
we had the money got allocated last year or this year, and it's made it into projects that are actually starting to go. So because of that, that should make up any downfall that there is in, I think there's a projected slowdown in industrial space.
Mm-hmm.
You look at some of these larger companies that have done layoffs, a lot of them were consumers of industrial space. And so there's been a lot of speculative building that probably will gobble up whatever less, demand's left, and there won't be a lot more. But if it's flat this coming year, that means all the workforce issues that we have talked about this year will exist next year. But the scary thing is, I hear a lot of people who are saying like, I'm just waiting to see what next year looks like.
Yes.
Because they're worried that, and I would say, as somebody who lived through 2008 and ran a business, I get it because I'm right. Like my tendency is to be conservative.
Mm-hmm.
But if most of the consensus is it's going to be slightly up or flat from a growth perspective next year, we probably got to get more people in the dirt world to say, I can't just sit here and wait and see because it's going to be too late. We're going to be in the summer next year.
Correct.
And the workforce problem is going to be just as bad, if not worse, next year.
I mean, this is 2023. I just read a McKinsey report over the weekend
mm-hmm.
that was projecting based on just the infrastructure bill. They said this demand is going to persist and it peaks in 2028.
Yeah. So I think you saw that McKinsey one. I think I saw another one that was like probably about the same thing. 27, 28 is the peak in construction spending from infrastructure, chips, and whatever the one last one is.
And that's if we can fulfill that demand every year.
Yeah.
But we know we can't, and so it will continue to stack up. And one of probably the most striking sentence in that report was contractors waiting on the sidelines are doing so at their peril, which I thought was fascinating.
What was also interesting, and I don't think it was that article. You sent it to me, but I don't think I remember it being in that article, but was another article that said municipalities and state agencies are delaying projects because they don't feel that contractors have enough capacity.
And these are big projects.
Yeah. And so it's like, here we are saying like, let's wait and see, which, I empathize with because it is historic what we've seen, right? We had this massive slowdown,
mm-hmm.
but construction didn't slow down.
Yeah.
And so we're like, well, when does construction slow down? But then with all this additional investment in infrastructure, it doesn't, nothing forecasts a slowdown for a long time.
And even I've been looking into the residential market too, which is fascinating because you would assume that raising interest rates as they've done would just cease all residential construction, cease home buying is what they're trying to do. But it hasn't stopped a market like a Denver, like a Dallas, Fort Worth, like a Charlotte, Raleigh, Florida, all Florida, because what happened I think everybody's looking to the 2008, 2010 time period. Yep. There are some parallels there. But what just happened over the past 3 years was there was this massive shift in the fabric of our society. These people in New York City, for example, were just like, screw this. I'm going to Charlotte. Like, I'm going to North Carolina. I'm going to Florida. And there's been these enormous, it hasn't just been natural growth. It's been completely unnatural growth. So a place like Florida, these home builders are saying, we don't care what happens to interest rates. There's such a demand for housing here. There's such a shortage that we're just going to keep going. And I don't know if that, maybe that eventually catches up with them, but it's kind of different than before.
Well, because they're looking at this statistic, it's net new migration, right? And so they can say, yeah, we see that, this is the headwind that's coming to us, but we have a net new migration of 5% to the state. Like that's a lot of people. I think and we're not economists, right? We're just talking.
I'm an idiot. So
I think what we're saying though is, and what I think we'll see is there probably needs, like, no offense to many of the vendors who support the dirt world, but go look at their earnings. Historic.
Oh yeah.
So there has definitely been people, there's truly supply issues, but there's also good business owners who have said, in the presence of supply issues, we can charge more. Supply and demand curve.
Yep.
And they've taken advantage of that. I think the interest rates creates headwind for pricing. And so I think even just the slightest of slowdown probably just it ends up being just price reduction so that affordability is still there, because wages are growing, but they're not growing at the speed at which home prices were growing. And so at some point, affordability becomes an issue. And I think that's where a lot of people are kind of hesitant. They're like, hey, our house is affordable in these markets. I'm in Phoenix. Hey, houses grew price-wise like 40% in 2 years.
Yeah.
Wages did not grow 40% in 2 years.
Right.
So how do we make sure that people can still afford houses? Well, they can't cost as much if the cost of capital is more. So the plus side is some people are saying, well, wages are going to go down or rates are going to go down. So I'll go buy. It'll hurt a little bit. I'll still go buy, but I'll just refinance in 2 or 3 years when rates come back down, which who knows if that's going to be the case.
It's the vendor thing is interesting though, because the vendors are far more consolidated than the contractors are.
For sure.
So any one contractor
by like 100x.
But by a massive factor. Yeah. So the contractors, since we're so fragmented as an industry, there's not really much buying power there. And I think a lot of that is down to the low bid mentality. You're fighting against everybody else. So you think everybody's out to go eat your lunch. But no, we're all on the same team. And until we recognize that, we're going to be taken advantage of by customers, by general contractors, by vendors, whoever it is. I'm not saying I'm painting with a broad brush. It's not every vendor, general contractor, whatever it is. But they can just keep, like you've seen general contractors, and over the past 10 years, it's like they're just moving another inch and another inch and another inch because they can. Like you don't, as a contractor, really have the power. In some places you do. I mean, you guys were big enough where you could probably push and pull in some directions, but like the little guy, you're just at the mercy of the market.
And a lot of times it may not be like blatant, like, hey, we're going to take advantage of price, but like contract terms, like, hey, we can take advantage of, we can change these terms, which reduces their risk. So maybe their margins haven't changed any, but they were able to negotiate in a way that their terms did. And so they said, well, now my risk portfolio of my business is less. So it makes my margin, my return better for my risk profile.
Correct. So,
and the thing that's interesting is like, I want to be careful because I don't think the vendors did anything wrong.
No.
Because I mean, capitalism is like in when supply is in short, you can charge more. Like that's how it works. It's just why I highlight that is I think it alludes to the fact that they can return to more normal margins without there being some huge effect on the economy.
What frustrates me though is that, and this was accentuated by the railroads, for example. So the railroads, are very profitable,
Yep.
and they've been very focused on precision scheduling railroading over the past decade plus, but which is great. Okay, that's great. That's fantastic. We need companies to be more profitable, but that profit doesn't go back to their business. It goes back to share buybacks. It goes back into dividend payments. They've spent more returning money to shareholders than they have in their businesses, which is a damn shame. So I see these big corporations so focused on serving the shareholder, which they have an obligation to the shareholder, but that's their goal as the business, to serve the shareholder. And then you have these other big companies that a lot of people don't talk about, owned by corporations outside of the United States, taking advantage of the system here to make them money, essentially, which scares the shit out of me from an infrastructure standpoint.
Yeah.
If we're trusting outside countries to control like a large part of building our infrastructure, you're essentially ceding control. Like what's happened with Africa and China, you're essentially ceding control.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what's interesting about just maybe this whole topic is maybe a more global economical cultural discussion, which is we're interesting. If you look for example, if you look at CEO pay compared to average pay in America, I don't have the statistic in front of me, but it's like 200 times or something. It's a crazy number.
Yes.
In most other developed countries, it's like 10 to 20 times.
Mm-hmm.
So like the idea behind American greed, like it does exist to some extent. And I was a business owner, so I mean, I'm the first to probably be guilty of, hey, I was trying to create return for me and my family, and return money to shareholders. But I think when people talk about, how do we recruit and how do we attract the younger generation, like they have to realize to a lot of younger people, making a difference matters, matters more than ever has. And so, some people like, they don't love like a Patagonia. They're like, oh, they're so, hippie or whatever. Right. But Patagonia has also understood that the people that work for them and the general public, especially their demographic, really care about giving back and making a difference. And so often I feel like in the dirt world, but even in corporate America, sometimes we fight against this trend of like, hey, there's this rising generation that cares a lot about doing good. How about just embrace it?
I think, but like a difference for you and like these big corporations is your primary goal wasn't to maximize your return on investment. Like you built the business because you enjoyed the act of building the business and employing people and serving the community and solving challenges. Like there was a lot there, and for the risk you're taking on, you should make money.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's this misconception about these construction business owners. Like they're just balling out all the time. I'm like, I have met very few construction business owners that do any kind of balling out. And if they are balling out, they've earned it. Like they've sold their company for a few $100 million. I'd be balling out too, because they worked their asses off for 20 years. Like, great. But most of them...
Really quickly, just so you know, that at first I had to get context because I'm old enough to not know what balling out meant.
Well, you've kids. Ask your kids.
I know. That's going to have to ask them.
But
I got it now because of context.
But yeah, just balling out, just squeeze the people with everything we can. Like that's not ever really their intent of these construction business owners that I've met. But the trouble becomes you get up to these big corporations that are run by people that have oftentimes never been out into the field. Like I see these big corporations that are so disconnected from their core business. All it is to them is a spreadsheet. But no, like they have no idea what they actually do.
Yeah.
Which shocks me, one, and scares the shit out of me too, because that's where that decision making comes from.
It's hard because as your company gets bigger, you hear more and more like you need to work on your business, not in your business. And so I think you start to feel like, oh, I got to be in all these meetings and, I can't be out there. But I will tell you, like when I resigned, I had countless people who came to me and said, what are we doing next? And let's go. I'm like, well, one, I'm not going to go start a construction company. 2, I have a non-compete.
Yeah, legally I can't.
And 3, I think the mission of the company you're at is incredible, and I think they treat people well. So stick with it. But what's interesting is I think one of the only reasons I had that was because I would go and work with them. Right? And I wasn't the best at any of it, but just the fact that they saw me go break bags of cement and put it in the grout mixer, go grind with the mechanic who was welding, go run a piece of equipment on a job site, go help lay pipe. Those things, when they saw that people that were in executive positions were willing to be there and to do what they did on a regular basis, endeared them to me as a leader.
Yeah.
And it's not that hard to do. And not only that, but then there's a lot more empathy for the frontline worker, which in almost every construction company makes up for more than 65% of your workforce.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you need to be empathetic to anybody, it's your frontline workforce.
Yeah.
And what are their challenges and what is it like, so that you can then navigate your business strategically to leverage one of your biggest inputs.
This reminds me, there was a mine manager in Arizona, and corporate mining, you'll see they'll have the nice clothes, and they don't look like they know where they are. They'll have the shiny hard hat. They'll come to like the overlook and with their arms crossed and ask some questions, and they're interested, but they're not really experiencing the business, the operation.
Yeah.
He would spend shifts riding in the buddy seat with haul truck drivers, which I think is brilliant. Like he wouldn't spend all his time in a haul truck, obviously, because he's the mine manager. But that, like your loading tools, I mean, you're beyond your loading tools, your drill and blast, your mill, like that is the business, getting ore to crusher. And so spending time with that haul truck driver in the seat, like even something as simple as, like, I feel like people that design equipment haven't been in equipment all that much. I'm like, have you really spent 12 hours in a dozer, like in rock? Because I don't think you have. If you're saying this is comfortable,
if you have, then you would definitely be in a high track.
Yes, yeah. But he would be there, and I think that's what created the cultural change that mine needed to achieve. Or like Mike Reed, for example. Like Mike Reed was the messiah of Huntsville. Like those guys would follow that guy anywhere because that is what he did. He was always there alongside his people. And I'm like in my latest talk, I'm not telling executives like you need to be out in the field 5 days. That's 6 days a week or whatever. That's totally irrational. But so often do I see the people in the office, even somebody that does payroll, for example, spend 6 months in the office and knock it out onto a job site. That to me is a huge missed opportunity and like a mistake as I see it, because you get so disconnected from the people you're serving. And the office is essential to any construction project.
Yes.
But it's not on a bid.
Yeah, it's not revenue producing.
No, it's not revenue producing. It's all just one line item. That's overhead. That's it. Everything else, like that laborer is doing things like finishing X amount, square feet of concrete, for example. You're actually billing for that. They're actually creating a product that you can go bill for. Like if you lose sight of that, a lot unravels pretty quick.
Well, and I think
it's easy to
do, but it's also like it's really important to remember, like everyone who's in an office, their entire role is really about supporting the field.
That's it.
Like, how do I make the field's job easier? Yes, you're going to have some concessions on processes because you're like, well, this process would make the field easier, but it doesn't give us any of the data we need. And we need this data to be able to continue to get work so that the field has more work.
Mm-hmm.
So there's definitely concessions there, but like it is all about how does the office staff support the field staff? And what I love about learning that in my career was like even now when I'm helping with BuildWitt training, like our whole approach is how do we make the training app and solution right for that 60 to 70% of frontline workers? And then if we get it right there, the people who support it can still use the app.
Correct.
But it's right for the people who are revenue producing. How do we upskill them? How do we train them? How do we make a difference in their lives so that they can be more productive, safer, higher quality? If we get it right there, everyone else can kind of fall in line.
Yeah. This is actually some of like the source of some internal conflict that I'm having right now is I'm getting more and more I don't know if frustrated is the right word, but like urgent and frantic because I'm reading these reports and I'm seeing these. And I don't just sit here and read reports. Like you're pretty well connected to the industry. I'm pretty well connected to the people that do the work, to business owners, a really broad understanding of the industry. And I just don't see, like with the trajectory we're on, going in any kind of positive direction. It's just getting worse, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And I don't want to be overly critical of companies because I know that's a terrible, that if you criticize somebody, they just go into their shell and fuck you and defend. But at the same time, we need to point out some of these key problems. And like even a business owner today, I posted about, hey, like maybe you'd think a company that depends upon the physical health of their people would be more invested in the physical health of their people, which is not groundbreaking. And I think anybody could admit in the construction industry, physical health is not the priority. But it's not even like a thought. It's just like over here. Like if ever see it talked about on a job site. But don't miss your stretch and flex because that is saving lives. But he's like, I'm tired of hearing that we don't care. And it's like, no, I need to craft my message in a way that says, I understand that you care. I know that you care more than anybody, but we need to care in a different way. It's not that you don't care. It's just that what you're doing clearly is not working and we need to go in a different direction.
I think what it is like, so often we are what we've seen others do. So like you get to a position where you're in a company and you can care. You show you're caring by shaking the guy's hand and telling him good job, which matters.
Mm-hmm.
But if, I don't know the statistics, but if 40% of our workforce is obese and smokes, well, we need to figure out how we show we care differently.
Yeah.
Because we need to not only shake their hands, but we also need to figure out how do we show them that we care enough about their physical health to make a difference in those statistics. Because they will be happier in their lives, they'll live longer lives, and they'll be more productive at work.
Yeah.
And so I get what you're saying. It's hard. I don't know the solution because we almost need to be speaking with that level of urgency. And maybe the reality is just, some people are going to hear the message the way you deliver it, and it will be impactful for them. For others, it'll hear it from me or Dan or someone else in the dirt world.
Yeah.
And it'll be impactful for them. So it's like, it's hard. I don't know. The balance is like, we all are blessed with being who we are, and we all resonate with people because of who we are.
Yeah. It's just like even training I've been very frustrated with because it's like we've created this product that I know would benefit any company that used it for a fact. And yet some of these companies just can't get out of the way. Like it's like, why are we talking about $8,000 right now or whatever it is? Why? Yeah. Like, okay, great. You bought this stupid HR system that doesn't do you any good. Like that's not my problem. Great. You made the wrong decision on that. Or maybe put it over there. Maybe it wasn't even the wrong decision. I don't care. Let's still go in this direction. All the content's right there. Like it's very, very frustrating because I'm not saying buy my product so I can make more money. I'm saying buy my product because I know you need it.
Yeah. Well, I think it highlights something that's interesting, and I might offend now because I'm gonna speak kind of frankly.
That's what we're going for.
That's not what we're going for, but it might happen. In construction, we are builders. and this is a broad term, but generally we're all builders and we really enjoy the heck out of it.
Mm-hmm.
You tell us roughly what you want and we go do it. Usually you tell us roughly what you want, roughly how you want it. You give us plans and specs and all that, and we go execute. Sometimes in construction, we have a hard time visioning the future state. So when we hear like, hey, here's a training solution, we think like, well, my people aren't going to use a training solution because like I can't envision a future state where that exists.
Yeah.
Or, hey, my guys don't even have smartphones, so I can't see that happen. Which, by the way, I'm so freaking tired of hearing that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we had 450 people. The number of people who didn't have a smartphone was like 2. So you can't even buy them. Like let's get rid of that excuse. Your people have smartphones.
Yeah.
They have a data plan. If they have kids, they'd most definitely have a data plan and a smartphone because that's just what happens. Like, so like I get the frustration, and I hopefully don't offend, but I think just some of it is like inherently we as builders build, and sometimes it's hard for us to have the vision of what could be. So what we're trying to do at BuildWitt is create a new vision of what the industry can be.
Yeah.
And we see where we think we want it to go, and we're trying to get people to go there with us. But we maybe have to do a better job of like giving us plans and specs so that they can see and go there with us. Like it's hard for them to do that.
Yeah, because we're only like, that's our ultimate goal is we want as many people to go with us as possible, because that's what we believe the direction of the industry needs to go. And we're not saying come with us because we're smart. We're saying come with us because we're out of the fray. Like, we're not bidding against everybody every day. We're not stressing about contracts and permits and equipment and this and that and tier 4 or whatever it is. We're outside of that world. And so this is like, here are the trends we're seeing. Here's the direction we need to go. But this is the argument. I forget, it was like Ben Horowitz or one of those books. He was basically his argument for why low profitability screws everybody. Because if you're making 3% a year, you're so focused on survival every year. You can't innovate. You can't afford to think about the future because you're consumed by survival. And if you can't get past that, it's like the hierarchy of needs. It's the same thing as a human being.
Yeah.
I can't go think about my career growth if I'm worried about where I'm going to eat today or if I'm safe in my home. Like, once those needs are met, then I can think about my career growth. But until then, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where the industry's at. If on average we're at 3% margin, we can't afford. We're just trying to find the next meal. That's it.
Yeah, and the caveat for 3% margin is like that's for $100 to $200 million companies.
Yes.
It does go up as you get smaller. And I think that's just because it's easier not to have waste.
As you go smaller, but then as you get bigger, they think these big companies make a ton of money?
No.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all.
No, it's not. Right now, it's probably better than it has been, but generally speaking, the larger you are, the less you make.
Yes.
Well, I think not only, you brought up something that we were on a call, Dan and I, with Kat, and we were talking about the training product. And they were like, hey, give us your elevator pitch. Like, why would we use this? And we gave it, and then we kept talking. And then later on, he's like, wait a second, now that should have been your elevator pitch. And what it was I just kind of said something that I feel like you've said for quite a bit, which is we are really just here to connect.
Mm-hmm.
Like, our position and our importance at BuildWitt is to connect the dirt world community. And so the reason we need people to come along with us is because perspective from all these different people is how we create products and services that support the dirt world better than anybody. You think of photometry, and photometry, most people who are in construction have heard of it. I mean, it's this process of flying over something with drones or an airplane and taking pictures from multiple angles. And what happens is, like, if you can imagine, like, there's a tree, right? Like, if I take one picture from above, it's not going to model very well. It's going to be very two-dimensional. But, 7 or more perspectives is what they say generally you need, at least, to start to develop this 3D model that more accurately reflects reality.
Yeah.
And so like what we really have the opportunity to do by being so neutral is say, we need the perspective of these manufacturers, of these vendors, of these contractors, of these owners. And if we can take all of those and then start to connect it, that's where we can position ourselves to really help the dirt world.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're trying to do. So when we say, come along with us, it's because we believe where we're headed is the right way, but it's also because we know there's inherent value of your perspective that helps us continue to make the dirt world a better place, which helps every business.
Correct. Yeah. I think another thing we're up against too is like this mistrust in the construction world. Like I've found that people are not very trusting, and it's like they're waiting for the catch. It's like, well, I'm not fucking you. I promise.
It might not just be construction, but I agree. But like,
I think,
come on, let's
past few years.
Forbes. Let's talk about the cover of Forbes magazine.
Well, I was thinking about that. I was thinking, you see on LinkedIn, people be like Forbes 30 under 30. I'm like, that doesn't mean a whole lot nowadays.
Don't get on that list.
Yeah, I don't want to be on that list.
If they call you to ask you to be on that list for some reason, I will say no.
Well, but he's
not allowed to be on it.
The funny thing is, on a lot of those lists, you get yourself on the list. It's all a game. But anyway.
Well, that is really funny. So I've actually had this conversation. I'm 37. And so somebody asked me, I sold the business at 35, and they said, hey, how come you're not on the construction 40 under 40? And I was like, well, because I refuse to nominate myself. And I've told everybody in my company not to nominate me. They're like, wait, so it's, you have to nominate yourself or someone in your company? I'm like, generally that's how it works.
Or it's like, we'll do it for you. Pay us $5,000. And you're like, I thought this was merit-based, but it's not. But
having said that, they do hit the mark in the, ENR.
Yeah.
Like there's definitely, they hit the mark.
I've criticized enough people in the podcast, but it's like, yeah, everybody's just kind of mistrusting. But I feel like this hyper competitive world that we're in, it's everybody's out to screw you, and you're always in litigation and this and that. Like litigation is, if you're not litigating as a contractor, you're not building stuff. It's like that's almost the norm, is being involved in litigation at this point.
Which is funny because in 15 years I litigated once.
Which you don't have to, but that's where a lot of the world works. But it's like everybody's waiting for, oh, that's how you're screwing us. I'm like, I've shared my whole life with you for 6 years. You've seen everything I've done for 6 years. And I'm saying we're going to go over here. And I've said a lot of things, and we've done a lot of things. So it's like, what? How is there still me here being like?
It's because like the construction industry is so funny. Like, and when I say that, I'm speaking as one of them. Like, we think that we have like some secret sauce. Like we convince ourselves like all the time, like, hey, they can't learn our processes, because if they do, we'll lose our competitive edge. I actually called up a customer once, or a competitor once, and I just said, hey, just so you know, like, this is what's going on, and I think you should be aware of it. And if you were aware of it, I think you'd probably make a change or two to it. Mm-hmm. And he was like, well, why would you tell me? I'm like, because if it was happening in my business, I'd want someone to tell me. Yeah. And he's like he had the hardest time believing that I wasn't like, some elaborate scheme to screw him.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
I'm not trying to screw you. Like, I'm like, literally, I'm trying to do the right thing.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think I want somebody to do the same for me. And I think that's where you're coming from, is like, you're not trying to, like, no. When you say to the industry, we need to treat our people better, or their physical health better. You're not trying to screw anybody. You're not trying to offend. You're trying to point out, hey, from my perspective, there's an issue here and we're not addressing it. Mm-hmm. But sometimes the truth hurts, I guess, maybe. I don't know what it is.
I don't know.
Because like, I think you look at work-life balance. We talk about it all the time. But guess what? Like, at the same time, almost every meeting I've been in the last 10 years that talks about workforce development, somebody who's gray-haired inevitably stands up and says, well, these guys just don't want to work. I can't find anybody who wants to work more than 60 hours. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, yeah, because you've worked more than 60 hours your whole life, and you've told every one of your kids, if there's one regret you had, is you work too much.
Like, or you've been divorced twice.
Yeah, like,
or
Or you did. I worked on Thanksgiving Day with my dad. Like, hey, I really appreciate how hard I learned to work from him, but I also realized like I'm never going to work on freaking Thanksgiving Day.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm going to be with my family. And so it's just interesting how when somebody points out somewhere that we can clearly improve, why it is that I mean, I guess it's human nature. It's easy to get offended.
Yeah. But this is another frustration of mine, is that those people, and broad brush, gray hair, they're the ones making the decisions right now, but they have the least skin in the game. They've
the
made
shortest amount of time.
Amount of the time. They've already made their money. They're sailing off into the sunset at this point. They don't have very many more. They're like, the risk to them is very low, and yet they're the ones making the decisions right now. And I like in the book Anti-Fragile, he points out that it should be common sense, but if somebody doesn't have skin in the game, if they can't be harmed by their opinion going in a different direction, their opinion is not valid.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, so I mentioned this on LinkedIn. I talked about The Anatomy of Peace. It's a book that I've read. I love it. It's by Arbinger Institute. I recommended it to Dan. He started reading it. He's like, I love it. The main character in this book, he's an executive, and he starts talking about kind of this very concept, which is like, I deserve this. So in the book, he would talk about this as being in the better than box. I'm better than you, so that's why I get this. And it's easy to fall into this, but what I think happens a lot in construction is I have been in this industry for 30 years. I've put in my 60 hours a week. I deserve now to have this, and you need to pay the price to get to where I'm at.
Yes.
But that thinking is not how we fix our issues. And our issues, we talk about them as an industry. And you talk about this better than me, but we talk about them as an industry. But what you highlight and what is more important is this is a needed service for society.
Mm-hmm.
So like these issues are workforce issues that affect our industry. But more importantly, they affect our country. They affect the world.
Yes.
Like if we can't attract people to do this work, that light switch may not work.
Yes.
And when it doesn't work, it changes the way everything goes. And I think that's where the urgency comes from is, hey, we know that we have an aging infrastructure. We know that the country has decided to invest more money than they ever have. And likely can't afford to do it again for 50 years if we don't figure out how to be better at budgeting as a country. So we have to take advantage and be very efficient in how it is we use these dollars that we have been given. And we need to make a difference on an infrastructure that is starting to age and fail.
Well, that's why I'm scared. It's like we're playing with the future of our society. Like the fabric of society is very fragile. You see a hurricane rip through somewhere, that community, that society unravels if people don't have power. You knock power out, you knock water out. You see what Russia did when they went into Ukraine. Go for the critical infrastructure. First thing, that's the quickest way to unravel society. Go after food, go after water, go after power, anything, cut that off. Everybody loses their minds. It is so fragile. And that's what's we're letting ego or whatever it is get in the way of sitting around and saying, we need to make sure that this is taken care of, or else my kids, I'm trying to make it more personal for people. It's like your children have no chance at success, no matter how much money you're leaving them, if they don't have clean water to their house consistently. All of that goes away. So your whole legacy, your whole whatever you're leaving for your kids, none of that matters if they don't have infrastructure. And that's what we're playing with right now. And it's like, how don't you see this? Because this is terrifying. Or like the railroads thing, I'm watching it so closely because it's like, I don't want them to go on strike. The whole country stops if they go on strike. But we're playing with that right now for the sake of serving you're staying in our lane and not budging on sick days, or something as crazy as we're not budging on sick days. It's just, we're playing with things that should not be played with.
Which is interesting because the railroad, I would consider the railroad part of the dirt world in that, it's all about infrastructure. So and they're suffering from the same issue, which is it's not glamorous to work on the railroad. I mean, it's a good paying job, but they also have their issues.
Yeah.
Right. Like the fact that that they have so few people that they can't afford sick days. Like, it's interesting. So I was in that peer group meeting and I asked this question, and it'd be interesting to see what the audience says about this. But like, okay, what's your sick time policy? Mm-hmm. What's your vacation policy? And, varied answers, but let's just say 4 weeks a year. Okay. So you're giving 4 weeks a year. So 4 weeks divided by 52 weeks in a year. What does that work out to? Somebody give me that math. It's like, 13?
13. Yeah, around there.
Every 13 people you hire, you need to have an extra person to cover that amount of sick time, vacation time.
Yeah.
Who plans that way in construction? Nobody. And it's like, no wonder they talk about like, hey, well, part of the reason with, our vacation policies are what they are is because, our people, they don't feel comfortable going on vacation. Well, yeah, no wonder, because we don't have enough extra people. Uh-huh. So when they go on vacation, they come back and it's a freaking shit show. Yeah. And they're fired up because they're like, it's more stressful when I come back because we didn't have enough people to sit in a seat. So every 13 supervisors, you need an extra supervisor. Every 13 operators, you need an extra like, we don't resource plan to that level. And I'm guessing when you're short on workforce and you're having a hard time attracting, that's the last people you're trying to get. But then it's like, well, if the people who are here aren't happy, well, then we're sure as heck not going to be able to attract anyone. Like, go ask your you want to understand how you're doing at workforce development. Go into a room with your frontline supervisors and say, who here is excited about having their kid work in the business? Or probably do that confidentially. And you'll see the numbers. And I did it 5 years ago. It shocked the heck out of me.
Yeah.
And I realized I don't have a workforce, development issue. I have a workplace issue. Mm-hmm. If I want to fix bringing people into the business, I got to fix the people in the business. Like, the business has to change to attract people. And I think that's kind of what this highlights is, hey, if you can't afford to give sick time, like, we don't need negotiators here. Like, you guys need to figure out how to get your crap together. And someone from the railroad's probably going to run me over.
Yeah, you know what you're talking about, whatever it is.
But like, they need to figure out, why is it that their business can't hire enough people to have extra people for sick time, vacation time?
Yeah, and
it's more complex because trains are all over. But
But
at the same time, they do a lot of smart stuff. I think they can figure it out.
But mining is headed in the same direction. Construction's headed in the same direction. There was a story I read on LinkedIn. Some guy got on there and he said, my crews, I was overseeing this crew. I was a superintendent or whatever it was. We were night paving, I think it was, over weekends. And we had done it for, 10 weekends flawlessly. This was a well-oiled machine. I told my crew, I need to go see my father this weekend. I'm not going to be there, but call me if you need anything. I was 100% confident they were good to go. They were good to go. I go see my father who has Alzheimer's and is dying. He gets a call from the owner of the company Monday saying, thanks for working here. You're done. Because he wasn't there for the shift. And this is a senior leader running a field leader running an operation that took care of everything he needed to take care of, that wanted to go see his dying father. And he was let go as a result. And now I haven't gone and verified this story. It's somebody on LinkedIn, but it seemed pretty damn genuine to me. Like, it was well written, and he got into all the details, was very transparent about it. And we're looking around like, why don't people want to work here?
Yeah. I think, well, it's easier, right? Like, it's easier to say, why don't people want to work here? We get to build stuff and we pay a lot of money. The harder thing is to actually say, what do we need to fix so that people want to work here? Like, hey, working Saturdays and Sundays weeks on end in the summertime when it's busy. I don't care who you are. It sucks.
Yeah.
It burns you out.
Yeah.
Like, until you've worked 70 hours a week, don't talk to me about it. Like, if you've worked 70 hours a week, more than 1 or 2 weeks in a row, you know the feeling. And it freaking sucks.
Yeah.
But it's what's expected. And it's like, well, should it be? And if it is that part of the reason? Like, is that part of the reason? I don't remember the statistic, but 3/4 of people that enter construction leave in the first year.
Mm-hmm. And that's that's like a question I'm asking is like, is there another way to do it? I don't know, because again, what do I know? But like, let's at least ask the question: does that need to be the norm, or is that just how the business is geared? But even I busted my ass at all the companies I worked for. I wasn't afraid of working hard. I was doing the 70, 80 plus hours a week when I was doing it. But then I got an offer from a company out of school, and I knew that they were going to own my life for the next 5 years. Yeah. Own it. Wherever they told me to go, I had to go without reservation. I had to go work as many hours as possible, probably 6, if not 7 days a week, nights, holidays, whatever the hell it was. And I just looked at that. I'm like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to go sell my life to this company, even though they're going to pay me well. And they're probably the best place I could go work right now. I wasn't afraid of the work. I just didn't want to go give my entire life to this company.
Yeah. And some of the, some of the years where you can afford to do fun things. Like, when you're young, like, why not go do fun things? Yeah. I think, you're hitting on something, which is like, we don't know, but we don't, like, obviously if we knew the silver bullet, we would just be selling that and making gobs of money.
But if we were selling a silver bullet, we'd be full of shit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we don't have the silver bullet. We don't know what it is. But the reality is we aren't trying to challenge status quo. What we're trying to do is say, let's have a conversation about status quo, and let's connect. And there are people in the industry that are doing things that are awesome, and we see it, and we're like, hey, that's really, really cool. Let's get you with a group of other contractors and share that story and that success. And we're trying to do that on a regular basis so that at least the industry can say, hey, well, I know this is working. It's different than what has been done, and I know it's working. I think one thing that what maybe, my final thought maybe is, like, I hear this, like, wages are out of control. I hear this a lot, like, wages are out of control, and, like, the worker has got too much power now. They can negotiate more, like that's part of the issue. The part of the issue is, like, well, workers can say, I'm not going to go work 5 hours away from my house. And I can definitely empathize. It's difficult when you have people who've worked for you for a long time and they were willing to do something and then things change. Mm-hmm. So it is frustrating. I'd also say, though, I think it's really an opportunity for us to say, hey, right now, with construction being as strong as it is, we can start to have conversations about things that we could have never had conversations about. Like, is there an opportunity for shift work? What is equitable pay? Mm-hmm. Is our pay equitable? Because right now I can go work at Chick-fil-A for $16 an hour. I work at the same location every day. I'm indoors. Maybe not. I might be in the drive-thru.
Yeah, you might be in that little tent. They put people in the drive-thru. Yeah.
Probably don't have a whole lot of risk of dying. There's not a lot of safety risk there.
That's fair. Yeah. You get food.
You get every day. You get, while on shift, you get 1 meal,
which is big. Yeah, that's big.
Right. And so then, what it says to me is, like, okay, our value proposition might need to be different. Mm-hmm. If a labor entering this industry is getting paid thereabouts, depends on the market, and it depends on if they're union or non-union. They don't get a lunch. They have to drive who knows how far, and there is a true safety risk. So the macro side of the infrastructure boom might allow us to fix some of these more micro issues, which is, what does wage look like? We say it's a good paying job, but is it a good paying job given all of its risk profile?
Yeah.
I don't know. I would argue it's not.
A lot of people, that's what workers are saying is, yeah, okay, it's good paying compared to me doing that over there, but the risk profile is so much greater, and what I have to sacrifice for this is not even equivalent. So you can't go. You're comparing apples to oranges. Yeah.
So I think what we have to do is just take advantage of what is prosperous economic times, and what, although there may be some storms in parts of the market, what still appears to be good economic times. If they're saying spending will peak by 2028, I mean, that means there's 5 years of potentially steady revenues for these companies. Or, most of the trends say steady next year and growing. I think we need to take advantage of those times to say, well, how do we use the economic prosperity to make changes and not be okay, even if you're an executive near the end of your career, with status quo, which I think is hard because you feel like you deserve the opportunity to not be pushing hard.
Well, and you have this thing you don't want to go disrupt. Like, you've got a good thing going. You're making more money. To your point, you're more successful than ever before. Why am I going to stop doing what I'm doing? That's bringing me the most success I've ever had. But this one woman came up to me when I spoke the last time. She's like, I really like your message, because it's not, we just need to spend more money on our people. It's, if we take care of our people, we make more money. I'm like, yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. That's the biggest thing I'm trying to argue here, is that it's a win across the board. We can go take care of our people. We can go solve our people challenge. Like, we don't need to have a workforce challenge. I think it's largely self-prescribed at a certain point. I think there's outside factors that have created it, but if we take the responsibility upon ourselves to overcome it, I think it's perfectly overcomable. And then companies are far more profitable. We shouldn't be at 3%. We should be at 10%, 15%, 20%, whatever it is. We should be more profitable. But if your people are showing up, they feel like they're cared for, they're making good money, the shift is a little bit more reasonable so that their family is not a complete disaster at home, they're a little bit more healthy, they're trained, so they've gotten new skills, not just on how to do a job, but just how to be better at life. They're included in how to build the damn project to begin with. They're going to be far more productive. You're going to be achieving far more than your business ever has. And
I think what you're highlighting
it all works.
Is really interesting, which is this. Labor costs make up between 9 and 20% of most construction companies. I'd say the average is between 14 and 16% of cost. But they control 100% of profitability. And we don't put 100% of our effort into efficiency when it comes to, like really, that's where, like, when you say, how do we become more efficient? 100% of our effort as leadership should be, how do I make my people better? And people say, well, what are you going to, well, what does that mean about equipment and material? Well, guess what? People manage all of that.
That's it.
So when it comes down to, although it only makes up 9 to 20% of your business, and there's probably some outliers that don't have as much material or equipment, but that investment needs to be all on those people, and those people will then go figure out how to be more productive on equipment and material and subcontractors. And so it's hard to do it because it doesn't make up the 76 to 85% of our cost, but really it's, you want to be more profitable, it's all with the people.
And it's hard to do because it's squishy. You just can't wrap your hands around it. But if I get this new software that's going to make me more efficient, then I feel better, because it's like I can at least see it. I can kind of tell what it's doing for my company a little faster.
And it's not as prescriptive because we're human beings, and we're unique and individual, and what works for a 330 excavator works for a 330 excavator, and a 210 and a 200 and whatever, right? Like it all works. So
yeah. Okay. Well, I think this was a good conversation. So
check.
Yeah. Thanks for stopping by.
Thanks for having me.
If people want to see what the heck you're doing, you've been posting more on LinkedIn, I've noticed.
I'm trying. I will get better. So I'm trying to get better, more active role here at BuildWitt, and excited about how I can make a difference.
Yeah, so it's Randy Blount on LinkedIn, BLOUNT.
Yep.
Jack.